Good evening, everyone. Am I audible now? Glad to meet all of you. I am Dilip K Kainikkara, and I secured All India Rank 21 in this year's Civil Service exam. First of all, let me say that I am very glad to be here, finally on the other side of the podium. Like, I have attended a number of toppers talks in person, and I have watched a lot more of them in YouTube, as I am sure many of you have. And they have been helpful to me in various ways. And I hope today I can be of some help to you. I mean, at least some help to you in some ways too. So I'll start with a brief summary of my UPSC journey. I am from Kottayam district in Kerala, which is also where I did my basic schooling. And after my schooling, I secured an admission in IIT Madras, where I did an undergraduate degree in B.Tech in electrical engineering. In my final year of college, I managed to get into Samsung Electronics in South Korea in a research profile. So I joined that job, and I have been working in South Korea for 2.5 years after that. So civil service had been a childhood dream of mine. I mean, I guess that's typical of like any middle class child in India, right? So the privilege of the job, the glamour of the job, all that used to appeal to me a lot in childhood. But just while I was working in Korea that I took a serious decision of actually pursuing civil services. And the primary objective, the primary motive was that I was finding that my own career objectives, like I wanted to do something for the community. Like I wanted a job where I was dealing on a day-to-day basis with the real problems of the community. And while that was my objective, my actual technical profile was limiting me to rather technical problems and serving the elite classes. So that dissonance eventually led me to consider a change in careers and maybe try something which will be more aligned with my community serving goals. And that's when I discussed with some of my seniors, some of my co-workers at Samsung, and some of them have already joined IAS before me. Like, I'm sure you'll be familiar with Kanish Kataria, like he was my senior at Samsung Korea. So after discussing with some of them, I realized that this is an attainable dream, and I started preparing there. I started preparing around in 2018, in the beginning of 2018. And after 2-3 months, I realized that it's rather difficult to meet the proper demands of both my proper job as well as civil service preparation. So I decided to resign. I mean, it was not an easy decision. It was a well-paying job. I mean, I had career security. I had a proper career ahead of me. But I decided to resign that primarily because, I mean, I had to stop doing justice to either my job, my full-time job, or I had to stop doing justice to the preparation. So at that point, I decided to choose preparation over the full-time job. And so I resigned. So at this point, like, I would like to tell aspirants that resigning the job, like, it's not an easy decision. It's not a decision that's one size fits all. It depends a lot on the demands of your specific job. If your job is something which provides you enough time to prepare after completing the demands of the job, then you can do that. I mean, there are like a number of aspirants who are successfully prepared for civil services while continuing to do their jobs. At the same time, if it's too stifling, if the demands of job are such that you are not able to do justice to the actual preparation, then maybe you should consider the decision of quitting the job. So anyway, that's the second path is what I chose. And so I returned to Kerala in 2018 and started preparing for civil services. And it took around 3 attempts. This is my 3rd attempt. So, the first 2 attempts, I made a number of mistakes. I will get into that in detail later. So, in my 3rd attempt, I was finally able to clear with a rank of 21. And so, thankfully, I am done with the UPSC journey, and that brings me here. So, first of all, let me go into optional selection, because in my opinion, that's one of the pivotal things, like in our preparation. We have to choose a proper optional, and there are a number of factors that drives that decision, and based on which we have to take that decision. In my opinion, like there are 3 factors there. One would essentially be interest. Like regardless of, there are a number of optionals that are hyped up in various ways. There may be good faculty in some optionals, and in some years the toppers may be scoring really well in some optionals. But on top of all that, essentially you have to have some amount of interest in the optional, because you will be spending a number of hours on that. Like you will be spending years of your life studying that at a graduate level or even at a postgraduate level. So to sustain that amount of preparation over those number of years, you have to have a decent amount of interest. So that's the primary concern. And then you need to have some amount of aptitude. For example, in mathematics, it can be said that if you end up as a topper in mathematics, you will get 300 plus marks. I mean, that is something that has held true over the years. But at the same time, that also depends on your background to an extent. Like if you have an engineering background, or if you at least have a science background, that will provide you a sort of advantage over like those from humanities backgrounds. And similarly, there are other optionals that are more amenable to humanities subjects, graduates, or those who have interest in creative writing. For example, English literature is an optional like that's very amenable to students who have like artistic talents or creative writing abilities. So on top of interest, also assess your aptitude and see whether that fits with the demands of the optional. And finally, and only thirdly, make sure that the optional provides quality material. For example, after assessing your interest and aptitude, suppose that it's a decision between mathematics and electrical engineering. At that point, look at the quantity of material available. Like, are there good faculty available? Are there good ready-made material available? Is there a good community available? Like, in fact, when I chose mathematics over physics and electrical engineering, which was my short list, it was essentially the availability of a proper community. Like, there were a number of aspirants who were also preparing with the same optional. In my, in Trivandrum, where I was preparing, and there was a number of Telegram communities, like the G20 or the Mathocrat community. So that sort of community support, that sort of availability of good faculty, availability of good material, that should be the third criteria. So once you, so these are the three things, assess all these three things, and based on that, reach an ideal optional. So after thorough consideration of these factors, I decided to zero in on mathematics. And now I'll go into some of the basics of mathematics preparation. Like, are there anyone who is preparing based on mathematics here? Oh, nice. Glad to see you. So I'll go into like a short summary of my mathematics preparation. As most of you know, preparation is essentially a one-year journey. Like, even if it's like if you are attempting twice or thrice, we are doing the same thing over and over again. So essentially, we have to look at the preparation in a one-year framework. Like right now, it's June 2022. So most of you will be attempting your first prelims, right? In next year, like 11 months down the line. So divide that 1 year, make a proper plan for that, and identify the various priorities. Like for example, you will have to prepare your optional. You will have to sustain your interest in current affairs and make sure that you are well versed in it. And on top of that, you have to study all the various GS standard books and develop a proper base in it. So balancing all these various things is what differentiates you from everyone else. Because almost everyone has the same knowledge base. Everyone knows which standard books are to be studied. Almost everyone knows how to prepare mathematics on a theoretical level. But converting that theory into practice is what distinguishes the toppers from the people who do not make it to the list. So that's a very slight advantage, but try to make the most of it. So that's what I would say. So coming to mathematics preparation, I would say covering the entire syllabus at least once would take around 6 months. It took me around 6 months. I mostly depended on IMS modules for most of my static content. Like IMS is essentially an institute based in Delhi, and they provide adequate content. I wouldn't say extremely great content, but they provide adequate content for most of the topics. So try to start using that, and most of the topics can actually be adequately covered using that. So once you cover that basic content, which in my opinion can be done in around 6 months, then try to delve into problem practice more. Start with PYQs. And if you are able to solve PYQs comfortably, I would say that's sufficient. That's a decent base level. But if you are not able to solve PYQs in any particular subject, then you will have to delve deeper into the subject. On top of IMS modules, use various standard books. There is a proper book list available. I wouldn't go into that right now. You can actually look that up in my channel. Just search for my name in Telegram and you can find the channel. So the book list will be available there. So on the basic level, if you cannot solve PYQs using just the basic text, then go on to the level of standard books. But don't use standard books for everything, because mathematics is a very vast subject. So studying every standard book at degree level will take you years on a practical basis. So don't do that. Be practical, use the base material, then build on that whenever you require. And another thing is that in mathematics, there is a physics element to some of the subjects. Like the math students here would know, like there is statics, there is dynamics, there is fluid dynamics. So these physical subjects are not that familiar to mathematics graduates or even to us B.Tech graduates. So what happens there is that there is a knack to it. I mean, the theory is pretty simple, but actually solving the problems comes, there's an additional extra ability that we have to figure out. So what helped me there is this YouTube channel called Mathocrat. So in my first year of preparation, I was actually doing really bad in these physics subjects. But in my second year, I was actually able to find out this YouTube channel, by sheer luck. And his presentation of these subjects, these particular subjects were really good. So in my second year, I was able to improve my marks in my second attempt. I was able to improve my marks in those subjects by a great deal. And so these are essentially the basic resources that I covered. But most importantly, in mathematics, what you need is an active community. Because it's not like other subjects in many ways. Like, on top of covering the theory, you have to do a number of problems. And eventually, you will get stuck somewhere or other. Like, regardless of how good you are, there will be areas where you will get stuck. I guess that's also true for like most of the science optionals, like whether it be physics or electrical engineering. In problem practice, there will be areas where like you cannot go forward entirely on your own. At that point, having a strong community can help a lot. Like if you have a good peer group where you are preparing, that's really good. And even otherwise, like if you have a good Telegram community, like that can be really helpful. Like when a problem is not working out well, take a screenshot and like put it in the Telegram community, and someone or the other will help you out. If it's an active community, someone will help you out. And you should also ideally help the others out. Like when it's an easy problem for you, when someone else is having a problem with it, you should help others out. So that kind of a collaborative culture can help a lot in these science optionals. So these are the basic preparation basics of mathematics. And another thing that's unique to mathematics is that learning theory alone won't help you. Like time management is a very crucial issue in mathematics. For example, in my second attempt, first attempt was really bad. I was underprepared. But in my second attempt, actually I was well prepared. I knew the entire theory. If I had like enough time, if I had infinite time, I would have been able to solve every question in the question paper. But the thing is, I hadn't focused enough on time management. So that's something that we need to focus properly. Like solving problems in infinite time doesn't matter. You should be able to solve the problem in 10 minutes. If it's a 10 marker, or if it's a 20 marker, you should be able to solve it within 15 minutes. So solving that in that particular time limit requires a lot of practice, because you do not have time to think out an answer, or you do not have time to derive stuff from basic principles. So proper revision, like remembering most of the important formulas by heart. And so that first principles approach that we often use in college. In college, like we have like exams, like we have like 1 or 2 questions, and we have a lot of time to solve it. That approach won't work here. So proper revision, like even after covering the theory subjects, if you have your own notes, that's well and good. Even otherwise, Topper's notes, like Kataria's notes are really good, as most of you would know. So using those notes for revision and doing proper problem practice in exam settings will definitely help you a lot in improving your content and getting to that 300 point in mathematics. I guess those are the basics of mathematics. I'll stop here. If you have any questions, you can ask later, or right now you can just raise your hand and ask any questions. So that's basically the stuff I had wanted to cover about my optional. So I'll go on to prelims and mains, which I guess everyone of you will be attending, right, in 1 year's time. So in prelims, what I would say is, it's not something that you can do in the last 2 months. Like that's a mistake that I have actually made, because in my first attempt, I was focused too much on mathematics, that I had actually neglected GS topics a lot. And I was of this idea that in the last 2 months, you can cram up a lot and you will be able to clear prelims. And I was able to clear prelims by a small margin that year, but that was a very risky thing to do. So I wouldn't recommend that to you. What I would recommend is that content generation is something you should do from day one. And content generation is actually common to prelims and mains. Like UPSC provides you a proper syllabus, right? Make sure that you are developing proper content on every single part of that syllabus. Like don't depend on hacks. Like you have like 1 year ahead of you. When you are like doing your second or third attempt, you do not have that luxury of time. Like you will be attempting your interviews, and then in the next month you will be writing the next prelims. So at that point, people have to cram. But you are the people who have like the relative luxury of 1 year of your life ahead of you. So what I would say is utilize every moment of that. Make a proper timeline which is dependent on your own demands. Because right now, you know that you have to split your time between, like you essentially have your optional prep. Then you have your current affairs coverage. And then you have your standard books. or the static content. So the thing is, each of you will have different needs here. Like some of you will have to spend a lot of time on optional preparation, especially if you are taking technical optionals. On the other hand, some of you will have rather lighter optionals. At the same time, you will find that like you have a lot to cover in static topics. For example, like I am from an engineering background, so I had to cover most of the static topics from the very basics, from the very scratch. But that's not the same situation of a person from JNU or a person from DU. Like they will have covered a lot of stuff. So identify your unique situation right now and divide your time properly on a rough basis. Like for example, I took the decision that I will take 6 months, around 6 months for covering my mathematics syllabus. And parallelly, I will try to complete my newspaper coverage on a regular basis. And I will be using the rest of the time for covering my static material. So this time division can be something that you can plan on your own. But once you decide on the rough division, try to make weekly plans. I mean, this is something that comes naturally because if you are attempting test series, which I'm sure you will be doing, they will be on a weekly basis. Like on every weekend, you will have a prelims test series or you will have a mains answer writing program. So you can naturally divide your syllabus such that your plan of study will align naturally to the demands of the exam. And in that way, you will have a natural way of self-analysis. Like if you are studying history in the same week in which you have a history test, at the end of your study session, you can actually analyze yourself using that test. And you can self-improve. So try to put weekly targets and divide your complete year. You have like 52 weeks in front of you, right? Around 50 weeks. So try to make a proper plan for every single week of those 50 weeks. And it need not be rigid because sometimes our plans can inevitably go wrong. Like we can fall ill sometime or our study time may not align to our expectations. I mean, we expect that we will be able to cover the entire spectrum in 2 weeks, but it may drag on for like 1 month or so. So such hurdles, such burdens can definitely happen, but then adapt to that. I mean, sometimes things may also go the other way around. You may finish stuff faster than like you are actually planning. So try to adapt to that, and at the same time, look at the larger goal ahead of you. In May, end of May in the next year, you will have to write your prelims. And then 3.5 months down the line, you will have to write your mains. And make sure that that's your last prelims and your last mains. Like, you don't have to like keep doing that cycle. Like, get out of the cycle in this particular year. Like, okay, don't get trapped into the vicious cycle. So once you have that larger objective ahead of you, your daily motivation will come naturally to you. And at the same time, motivation alone won't get you anywhere. I mean, right now you will be very highly motivated. But it's very difficult to like get up in every morning and have that same amount of motivation. Like motivation won't get you to read newspaper every day. Like it won't get you to study every day. So what you need is habits. So make sure you are developing habits right from this day. What I would strongly suggest is keep specific time slots for doing specific things. Like if you make a habit of reading newspaper every day, like from 7 to 8, after a while it will come naturally to you. You won't really have to think about it. You won't have to plan for it. Like when it's 7 in the morning, your brain will demand newspaper. Like, I mean, so that will naturally come to you. So once you convert some of these preparation basics into habits, you can stop worrying about them and you can focus on the more complicated stuff. So that's something that I would strongly recommend to do. And also coming to current affairs, what I used to do is, as I said earlier, I used to read the newspaper daily, but that alone won't do. Because, our brain essentially forgets things. Like neurons degenerate, the neural pathways degenerate. So we will need proper revision on a regular basis. So when you are making timetable, as you mentioned earlier, allocate proper amounts of time for revision. Don't just randomly split the syllabus into 50 parts and cover it once. That won't really help you. Like, I mean, if you are studying like Lakshmikant book in the next month, in June, in January of next month, you will have forgotten the entire thing. And then you will have to start from scratch again. So that's like entire waste of time. So what I would recommend is, when you are studying something this week or this month, at this particular point of time, allocate some time for its revision, like, I mean, some 2 months or 3 months down the line. There is this famous concept called space repetition. I mean, some of you might have heard of it. The thing is, when you study something, immediately after that, it's very active in our brain. But those memories will slowly start degenerating. But before they degenerate completely, if you do a quick round of revision, those memories will get ingrained faster. So, for example, if you are reading newspapers daily, at the end of the month, you will have forgotten some amount of that month's news. But if at that point of time, you do a monthly revision, using the monthly compilation. I mean, Vision IAS has a really good monthly compilation, right? So if you make this habit that at the end of every month, you will use that monthly compilation to do a proper revision, then that will actively recall. I mean, your recall will definitely increase. And then at the end of these 11 months, you can do a quicker revision. I mean, you can use PT 365. That's what I actually used. And yeah, you are Vision students, so I guess you will naturally use that. So that will naturally give you like 3 rounds of revision. Read the newspaper daily. At the end of the month, revise using the monthly compilation. And then at the end of the year, right before prelims, revise using the PT 365. So these 3 rounds of revision will come naturally in current affairs. But it won't come naturally in GS. In GS, you have to plan for it. Like when you are studying Lakshmikant now, or when you are studying like environment material now, allocate similar points of revision, like at the end of the month, or at the end of every month, allocate revision points for all the static subjects you have covered in that month. And similarly, allocate revision points for the optional subjects you have covered in that month. Or it need not be month, it can be on a weekly basis, on a bi-monthly basis, but make sure you are allocating revision points and following them properly. So repeated revision, repeated and frequent revision is the mantra that you have to follow essentially. And coming to standard books, I mean, you will have heard a lot of conflicting opinion on this. And since you are institute students, I guess your institute will be providing you a set of standard books, and they will be providing on a lot of GS material. So you will have no dearth of material. And then I guess most of you are on like in various Telegram groups, like, and you are getting a lot of content. So the thing is, don't get overwhelmed with content. Choose a limited set of standard books. But at the same time, make sure that you are not losing out any topic. I mean, saying a limited set doesn't mean that you should limit yourself in such a way that you are handicapping yourself. Make sure that you are covering the entire syllabus, but make sure that you are not overdoing stuff, that you are not doing redundant stuff. For example, I know students like who have covered Lakshmikant really well in polity, and then they are like, okay, I'm done with Lakshmikant now I'll try DD Basu next. And then they'll be reading DD Basu, and then they'll be like, okay, I'm done with this now I'll try some toppers notes next. I mean, that doesn't really work, because these books are very different. So reading DD Basu is not a natural revision of Lakshmikant. So you will be confusing all these elements in your brain, and eventually you will not be able to recollect any of it. So what I would recommend is, if you study Lakshmikant properly, your polity is done to an extent. Then allocate some time for revising Lakshmikant. And then, if at all you feel that you are weak in some areas, you can naturally identify that. When you are writing prelims test series, or when you are writing mains test series, it may happen that you are weak in some areas of polity, despite reading and revising Lakshmikant. That can definitely happen. If that happens, try to revise those specific topics using some other material. There you can use other material, because Lakshmikant is not working for you in that particular sub area. But otherwise, stick to the particular source, keep revising it. And another thing is, the syllabus is key. Okay, there is UPSC syllabus is the only authentic source you have got. Like, it's given in the UPSC notification, that's the only authentic source you have got. Everything else is basically trend analysis. Everyone else is just guessing based on previous trends. And you have to depend on that to an extent, but make sure this is your Bible, especially for mains. For mains, what I would recommend is you should take a printout of the syllabus. Like for GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4, there will be a detailed syllabus. There will be like 14 or 15 subtopics per section. So take a printout of that, and at that point, once you are done with prelims, you will have a basic level of content. But there will be these small subtopics that are not covered in prelims. For example, in GS3, there is this small subtopic called investment models. That's not really covered in the basic standard books of economics like NCERTs or Shankar Ganesh or even in Ramesh Singh. So identify those small subtopics and make sure you are covering them. Because when it comes to small topics, the return on investment is really high. For example, if you study like the entire book of Lakshmikant, that's a huge book, right? Or if you study like the entire book of Bipin Chandra on modern India or Spectrum on modern India, you will be getting 3-4 questions in mains. So you will be getting 30 to 40 marks. But if you study this small topic of investment models, that's like 10 pages, 10-15 pages. There are like 3-4 different investment models, HIM model, PPP model. Like, so you can cover that entire thing in just 10 pages, and that will get you 10 or 15 marks. Because one question will definitely come from that. Most likely it will come from that. So getting 10 or 15 marks from just 10 pages of content is a much higher return than getting 30 marks from one entire book. So make sure you are identifying these small topics and you are allocating sufficient time to it. And to do that in an organized manner, there is something that I used to do. What I do is, I used to make online notes. Like I will create different folders for GS1, GS2, GS3 and GS4. And within that, I will create small subfolders for each subtopic. And whenever I find relevant content for that particular subtopic, I will copy paste that in that particular folder. So by the time you reach mains exam, you will have some natural revision material with you. For every small subtopic, and for every big subtopic of course, you will have a small amount of concise material that you can use. Regardless of the exact demand of the question, these general materials can be used in many answers. So that will provide you some core content on based of which you can build your foundation, and then on top of that you can build the specific answer to the demand of the question. So making that kind of notes can be helpful a lot. And at the same time, note making is not for everyone. I'm sure there are hundreds of you here. So your notes will be of varying quality. Like some of you will be making really good notes and you can use that for revision. But if during prelims or after prelims, if you find that your notes are not of that good quality, you can always depend on the institute notes or you can depend on other topper copies. So don't worry about your note making qualities. Try your best. But if you are not doing well, remember that there are always alternatives available. So don't lose hope. And also don't waste a lot of time on note making. So this is something that I have often seen a lot. There are aspirants who feel underconfident in their notes. So they lose a lot of time like making daily current affairs notes or making and revising their GS notes. So most of their preparation time is spent on making notes rather than on their own preparation. And that has often turned out to be helpful to other aspirants. But that has very badly affected their own preparation. So do not make that mistake. If you are good at note making and you can do that in a reasonable amount of time, go for it by all means. But if you are not that good at note making or if you are taking too much time on it, you can leave that. At this point of time, there's a lot of material available out there. It's not like 2000s or 1980s. There are plenty of material that are available online, which is of really good quality, and you can depend on that instead of standard notes. And now I will go to specific exams, coming to prelims first. We have been covering a lot on content, but the thing is, prelims is not just about content. In fact, I would say it's only 50% of prelims requirement that's based on content. The other half is proper exam preparation and meeting the demands of the exam. For example, I have been able to clear prelims in a decent manner, in all my 3 attempts. But even in my 3rd attempt, when I had revised, at that point, I had read every book 5 or 6 times. Lakshmikant I had read at least 5 times. So even at that point, in that prelims, there were 100 questions, right? I only knew answers to less than 50 of the questions. So that's the peak. Unless you are extremely good at GS, you will only know the exact answer to around 50 questions. So taking that 50 to 90 is a skill that you have to acquire. You have to acquire that properly by doing a proper mock test series and doing a large number of MCQs. Again, this might come naturally to some of you, especially those from engineering backgrounds. We have done a lot of MCQs during our engineering entrance days. So that MCQ elimination skills might come naturally to them. But at the same time, that was years ago. So you'll still have to brush up on those skills. So what I would suggest is join a proper mock test series and take it seriously. What I have often seen is that people do take mock tests, but they do that in a casual manner. In our head, this thing runs that, it's just a mock test, TK, we'll do it somehow. Actual exam, we'll do everything seriously. It doesn't work that way. At least in the 2 or 3 months before the exam, take every mock test exactly as you would take the prelims exam. Take it in a near exam setting, allocate a proper amount of time to it, do it in a rounds-based manner. I think that's how you would do it. What I do is, in the first round, I don't spend too much time on any question. I just try to hunt down every question which I know and attempt it. And I will actually bubble that in. That way we are reducing a lot of workload. We are reducing our own pressure. We do not have to end up in a situation where we only have 10 minutes left and we have not bubbled anything. That's a situation where a lot of things can go wrong. You can bubble wrong things. There have been disasters that has happened at that point. So do not put yourself in that situation. In the first round, identify every single correct answer that you definitely know, bubble that in. And then in the second round, bring out your elimination tools and every other logical tool you have. In the first round, it's 1 year down the line, right? Ideally, hopefully you will have 50 questions done. after the first round. So there are 50 questions left. This is the ideal case. If it's a bad day, you'll have more questions, but still, in the remaining questions, use every logical elimination tool you have got. You have 1 year left, develop those tools. There are a number of ways. I mean, prelims, you have like a lot of information in your hands. Like there's a question, there are 4 options, you only have to identify the correct option. You have the entire information in front of you. So even if you only know part of the answer, that can be used to at least eliminate 1 or more options. So spend some time from right now, devote some time to develop these elimination skills, because that's what's going to get you over the threshold. You cannot cross the threshold just using your knowledge. So invest some time in that and develop your confidence. Trust in mathematics. If you are doing 50-50 questions, if you have eliminated 2 options and you only have 2 options left, blindly choose one of them, it will work. You won't get 100 of, if you are like attempting 10 questions on base of 50-50, you won't get 10 of them right. But mathematically, statistically speaking, you will get 5 of them right. And that's enough. So that's net positive. Like getting 5 out of 10 is net positive. Even if you get 4 out of 10 or 3 out of 10, that's net positive. So statistics is on your side. Attempting 10 50-50 questions and getting only 2 correct is a statistical improbability. Like that might happen on a very bad day for you, but trust in yourself. Okay. So if it's 50-50, definitely do it. And I would actually suggest that if you have some amount of information, if you can eliminate at least one option, go for it. Again, mathematics is on your side. So go for it, be confident. And this is only for paper 1, of course. In CSAT, you do not have to top the exam. You just have to clear the cutoff. Like getting 66.66 is as good as getting 200. So there, go for the easy fruits. Like whether it be mathematics and whether it be English questions, there will be some simple questions. In mathematics, definitely, there are 80 questions, so around 40 questions will be mathematics and logical aptitude. There will be 20 questions that everyone can solve. There will be 20 questions that 8th standard kids can solve using basic common sense. So identify those 20 questions, do those 20 questions, and you have got a decent amount of marks. And you only have like a small improvement to go from there. Again, hunt down the easy questions in English, and you will most likely get over the threshold. All you need to do is 40 questions. There are 80 questions. You only need to do 40 of them and get 31 correct. If you do 80 of them, you only need to get 40 correct. Okay, but that's not a thing I would advise. Go for the 40-31 strategy or 50-33 maybe. So choose the easy questions, spend adequate amount of time on them, and keep your cool. There will inevitably be some difficult questions, but there will be easy ones. Hunt for them, find them, clear CSAT, get to the next round. And even in GS1, do not panic. This is something that happens. UPSC can throw surprises at you. That happens every year. This year, they suddenly increase this. They introduced a new question where elimination tricks kind of goes out of the box. Like the options are essentially like 1 option correct, 2 option correct. So either you have to have a lot of information to get that down to 50-50. But the thing is, keep your cool. These are only 6 questions. There are like 94 other questions out there where you can still use those skills. And those are enough to get you over the top. So keep your cool. And this happens every year. In 2020, 3 sports questions came out of nowhere. The thing is, make sure, have this thing in your head that everyone who is attempting the paper is almost in the same state as you. You have not prepared sports, of course, but no one has. No one in the right brains has. Because UPSC hasn't been asking sports questions for over 10 years. So no one has prepared it. No one is prepared for those 3 questions. So leave them. Those are not going to affect your relative performance. So make sure that you are staying in the optimal and strong state of mind throughout the exam. In 2019, this actually happened to me. Till 2018, agriculture was a very minor subject. I guess you would know. Only 2 or 3 questions used to come from that. So naturally, most of us didn't prepare much on agriculture. But in 2019, suddenly 8 questions came from agriculture. And by sheer chance, in my question paper, those were the first 8 questions. So I'm taking the paper, I'm looking at the first question, TK, I don't know it. TK, I'll go to second question. And this thing is repeating, okay? In the first 6, 7, 8 questions, I didn't know anything. I didn't know any of those questions. So that thing can happen. But don't let that get you down. There were people who didn't clear that year just because of this. In that particular set, they lost their confidence seeing those 8 questions. They were like, okay, sal to nahi ho rahe. Done. So don't do that. There will, I mean, all you have to do is you have to do 90 questions and get 60 of them correct. That will get you to 100, and 100 is a safe cutoff in most of the years. So you can afford to leave 10 questions and get 30 questions wrong. So even if the first 10 questions are not working for you, TK, there are still 90 more questions. You only need 60 of those. So keep that positive mindset, and that will get you through prelims. That's what I would like to say about prelims. And then moving on to mains. After prelims, the thing is, your content would be okay. Like, it wouldn't be that bad. If you are clearing prelims, your content would be okay. If you are not clearing, like I mean, you don't have to worry about mains. So once you get to the main stage, you don't have to, content is a secondary thing. What you have to focus on is presenting that content. Because presentation is what actually makes the difference. Like, I know plenty of aspirants, even you would know some aspirants who have like really great content, who are like experts in their fields, but who are still not getting marks in GS papers. What makes the difference there is presentation. So make sure that you are improving your answer writing skills from right now. Don't wait for prelims and don't think that, okay, in those 3 months, okay, I'll get it done. That doesn't happen. So from right now, focus on improving your answer writing skills. You can start slowly. I mean, if you don't have content, answer writing doesn't make sense. So in these initial few months, you can focus more on improving your content. But once you have a decent grasp of at least 1 or 2 subjects, like once you finish history, try writing some history questions. Once you finish polity, try writing some polity questions. Start slow, but be steady. And the thing is, in answer writing, be open to suggestion. The thing is, all of us have like varied backgrounds. In engineering, we have a way of writing. In humanities, we have another way of writing. Both of these don't work for UPSC. Like, UPSC has a third way of writing that's very unique to UPSC. So you have to be open to unlearn things that you learned in college. And you have to learn things that actually work in UPSC. So the primary starting point, in my opinion, would be toppers copies. Because toppers are people who have figured out the UPSC game. They know what works in the UPSC papers. So regardless of how good you think your answers are, be prepared to learn from those topper copies. I mean, don't depend on one single topper. Like, everyone will have different strategies. But once you go through the copies of like some 5-6 toppers, you will definitely see some common patterns emerging. Like, most of them will be writing short introductions. Most of them will be writing in bullet points. Most of them will be removing all the extraneous content and like focusing on just the crux of the stuff. So you will be able to identify these common patterns on your own. And once you do that, try to adapt that into your own answers. And you have enough time to do that. Like, 1 year is more than enough. So right now, start this process right now. I mean, you can again use help from all the various mentors you have got. Again, once you write an answer, show it to your peer group or show it to your mentor. Because early on, it's very easy to correct your mistakes. Because you have not solidified in that. But if you have, I mean, if you start writing now, if you are not showing it to anyone, and if you keep doing that for 6 months, your bad habits will get solidified. At that point, it will be very difficult to unlearn stuff. I know people who are finding it impossible to write in bullet points because they have ingrained, I mean, in their brain, they have this thing that the answers should have to be written in essays. I mean, they have to be written in descriptive, complete sentences. So once you have that thing in your brain, it's very difficult to take away. So in the very early stages, once you write answer writing, make sure that you are ironing out your simple mistakes. You are ironing out, and you can only iron out that mistakes by getting outside feedback. So make a peer group, show it to your friends, or you will have like answer writing guidance in your institute or whatever institute you are learning. Use all those. Like, you have plenty of resources. The only thing is you have to use that properly, and that will be done. Okay. And now I'll go deep into the specific papers of mains papers. So I'll cover essay and ethics later. And in GS1, GS2, GS3, the answer writing demands are like pretty similar. In all of them, like the standard format, like suppose it's a 10-mark question. The standard format is like a short introduction, a short conclusion, and rest of it will be the body of the answer. There, what everyone recommends is that, what usually works for most toppers is that you have to write briefly and to the point. The thing is, the evaluator won't be that invested in your paper. He is a person who is just there to do his job. So make his job easiest for him. Like, don't make your text very cluttered so that he will have to like hunt for the points. like make sure your paper is such that the points jump out of the paper, so that the evaluator finds it very easy. Okay, TK points is there, done. So make it easy for the evaluator. So what I would suggest is the questions, they will naturally have like subparts, right? For example, this year there was this question like, where did the volcanic eruptions happen in 2021? What are their impacts on regional climate? So that question naturally has 2 subparts. And in 50-mark questions, there will usually be 3 subparts. I mean, this is a rule of the thumb. It need not always be true, but generally that's so. For example, in this year in GS3, there was this question, what is cryptocurrency? What are its impacts on global society? And what about the Indian scenario? So that has 3 natural subparts. So what I would suggest is, divide that answer naturally into the subparts. If we take the volcano question, there are 2 parts, right? First part is identify the volcanic eruptions of 2021. So make that the first subheading. This is intro. And then make that the first subheading, write points here. And then the second part is what are the impacts on regional climate. So write a second subheading here, impacts on regional climate or whatever, and then write the bullet points here. And the intro and conclusion should be as short as possible. In 10-mark questions, usually the demand of the question won't be very analytical. It will usually be to enumerate something or discuss something. So we won't need much critical analysis. So keep the intro and conclusion as short as possible and dedicate most of the paper to identifying the different subparts and addressing them in a very succinct manner. And even in 50-mark questions, do the same thing. Instead of 2, there may be 3 or even 4 subparts. Give proper headings, box them in, and then write the answers in bullet points if you can. If you cannot do it at all, okay, use the essay format. Even if you are using the essay format, separate them into short paragraphs and underline your important terms. Again, remember this thumb rule, your answer should be such that the important points jump out. The evaluator shouldn't have to search for them. I mean, he should be able to just glance over the paper and the point should be there, jumping out at him. So that's the basic principle of answer writing. And this won't come overnight to you. I mean, theoretically, TK itne hi hai, but it's not as simple as it looks. Because as I said earlier, our ways are a bit ingrained. So we have to unlearn our earlier ways. Unless you are already writing in this format, TK, you are done. Like, keep doing that. But most of us won't be doing that, right? We will have our issues. We'll have difficulty in like identifying the subparts. Some people have that. Some people have the difficulty in like writing a proper intro. Some people have this, I mean, they start writing the intro and it goes on and on and on. It goes on till here or something. So that's difficult. So you will make these basic mistakes in the beginning. That's natural. But don't keep doing it. Every answer you write is practice for you. Also see it as an opportunity for self-improvement. Like once you write a mock test, it gives you an assessment of where you currently stand, and it also gives you an opportunity for improvement. So that's also true in prelims, that's also true in mains. So generally, whenever you are taking a mock test, like once you take a prelims mock test, you will get your marks, you will know, take a class name, where is your rank. You will know that. But that's not the purpose of the test. The purpose of the test is to assess yourself. Like take some time to read the detailed key, cover your shortcomings, and also take some time to assess where you lost the marks. If you are like losing too much marks, it can be due to various reasons. It may be because you do not have adequate content. It may be because your content is fine, but you are too afraid to take those chances, 50-50 chances. And it may be because your thought process is such that it's taking you to the wrong option somehow. So every test you write, do some self-analysis, identify what went wrong, and try to correct that. And once you keep, I mean, it may not get okay in 1 week, but once you keep making these incremental changes over the weeks, eventually, by prelims, you will reach that perfect state, where once you get the paper, you will know what is to be done. It will come as second nature to you. And if you keep improving your answer writing in the same way, every week you'll write some answers, you show them to your peers, you get them evaluated, try to make improvements. By the time of mains, trust me, every one of you will be doing it really well. Okay, so practice is what makes perfect. I mean, your content generation is important, but this is equally important. Practicing MCQs for prelims and practicing writing answers for mains, that's equally important. Never forget that. Never sacrifice answer writing practice for content generation. And the other way too. I mean, just knowing the way to write answers doesn't help if you do not have content at all. So give equal importance to them. Make sure you are covering both of those. Okay. And when it comes to essay, like essay is something that I have been doing recently well. All of this goes out of the window. Essay mein, you know what an essay is, right? You get a single topic and you have to write a detailed exposition on it. And the thing is, a lot of things can go wrong there. Because GSMA, you only have 2 papers. So even if it goes wrong, it only affects 10 marks of yours. But SMA is not like that. That entire paper has 250 marks. And so each single essay has 125 marks. So if something goes wrong somewhere along the way, that can affect that entire chunk of 125 marks. So the risk is higher. So what you need to do is, SMA, time constraint is not that important. SMA, you will have time. You only have to write 12 plus 12, 24 pages. Actual GS exam, you have to write 50 pages. So it's less than half of the demand of the proper GS exams. So you will have a lot of time. So essay paper may take some time. Take some time to brainstorm. Actually use the rough pages to make a rough draft of the essay. And do not put pen on the actual paper till you have got a rough draft of the essay in your brain. That's a fundamental thing. SMA, you have time to plan. GSMA, you do not. I guess you know that, right? I mean, you have to write 50 pages. You do not have time to plan. You do not have time to think. Once the bell rings, you take your pen, you put it to paper, and you keep that pen on the paper till the final bell rings. That's how GS works. But do not take that principle to the essay paper. Essay paper is different. Keep that in mind. So essay paper, once you get the topics, first thing is there are 4 topics. So choose one well. Because do not consider a meta-analysis. Do not think which one will get you more marks. Do not think which of these essays will make you look cool. I mean, if you choose a cool topic, you will look, people do consider those things. Don't do that. Choose a subject which you are comfortable in, which you understand fully. Even if you do not have as good content as another topic, if you are understanding the content well, if you are understanding the demand of the essay well, choose that topic. And because you have enough time to brainstorm, you have time to think and generate contents. So choose the proper topic of the essay based on your comfort level, based on how well you understand the topic. UPSC may one big issue that happens to aspirants is they misunderstand the topic. If that happens, tabito, those 125 marks are gone. So make sure you are choosing a subject in which you understand every word, in which you understand the proper demand of the subject. And once you do that, again, another thing is, recently, the weightage of the so-called philosophical essay has been increasing. This year, actually, all the 8 subjects are somewhat abstract. But the thing is, the philosophical essay, that term itself is a misnomer of kinds. Because the topics may be philosophical, but you are not supposed to write philosophy in the essay. I mean, you may write some philosophy, but it's not supposed to be a philosophy paper. Because UPSC notification mein likha hai, candidates are supposed to give a generalist answer which do not require specialized study. So, your answer should not be based on specialized study of philosophy. Regardless of whether the topic is philosophical or whether it's more concrete, your answer should be a practical, simple essay which appeals to the person who reads it. For example, this year, one of the topics was philosophy of valuelessness is utopian, but materialism is a chimera. It sounds complicated, but the thing is, first, try to understand that in layman terms. It's written in a very sophisticated manner. The thing is, what they meant to say is, pure valuelessness, pure elimination of all the needs and desires is impossible. And at the same time, the other extreme, complete pursuit of your greedy, materialist targets, that's also delusional. That won't take you anywhere. So the crux of the idea was that a middle path is what's ideal. You cannot completely eliminate your desires, but that doesn't mean that you should pursue every desire you have got. So once you get that crux of the idea, think about that in dimensional manner. Just like what you would do in a standard essay, or just like how you would do in a standard answer. Think about how this abstract idea can be applied in social terms. Society may you can apply that, right? Society may one extreme would be everyone leading the Buddhist way of life. And the other extreme would be complete unregulated market economy, which will lead to monopolies and all those issues. So that would be an application of this idea in economic terms. And again, you can apply that to culture. You can take that to wars. There were leaders like Hitler who were so greedy that they took on the fascist or Nazi ways. On the other hand, there were leaders who completely absolved the demands of the kingdom that they were overcome by colonial rulers, or that eventually led to the destruction of the kingdoms. So similarly, once you get the basic idea, try to apply that to concrete subjects, society. I mean, you will have a lot of content at that point. You would have studied a lot of environment, you would have studied a lot of polity, history, world history, post-economic, but all those things. So try to apply this abstract idea to all those things you have learned already. And you will naturally get points. Trust me, you will get points. And once you get points, organize that into 10 paragraphs, some 10, 11 dimensions, and just let it flow. That's it. So that's how philosophical essay works. So there is no such thing as philosophical essay. The topic is abstract. Try to identify the core demand of it. Try to analyze that along different dimensions and just let it flow. I mean, that's what you would do in a standard essay, right? If the topic is climate change leads to the peril of mankind, what would you do? You would essentially analyze that. How would climate change affect our society? How would that affect women more? How would that affect international relations? So just think along the same lines. And the thing is actually, if the topic is philosophical or abstract, you will have more freedom. Because if the topic is climate change, or if the topic is something technological, you have to stay within those narrow bounds. But if it's very abstract, like mindlessness, greed, dono bura hai, like I mean stay in the middle, that's very abstract. So you have a lot of freedom to think. So use that freedom, write a good essay, you will get good marks. That's what everyone does. Again, look at some topper copies, especially in philosophical essays. There are some really good topper copies in the recent years. Look at that, you will know that this is what everyone does, and this is what fetches marks. So don't think too much about it, just go on this rather easy process. And finally, coming to ethics. Ethics again, I mean, part of that, at least the first part of that, is very similar to GS 1, 2 or 3. I mean, there is a proper specified syllabus there. As I said earlier, read that syllabus and make proper notes on every single subtopic. GS 4 main, this is particularly important because sometimes you have to use those keywords from memory. For example, suppose GS 3 main, there is a keyword like secularism, or GS 1 main, there are keywords like secularism or regionalism. You only have to use that when they are already given in the question. If the question is what is secularism, you have to think and like recall what is secularism, you have to write a definition. But GS 4 main, the thing is, the questions will be like, what are the good qualities of a civil servant? Tabito, the keywords are not given in the question. So you have to remember the keywords from the syllabus and reproduce that in the answer. Integrity, like selflessness, whatever, honesty, like I mean, yes, hota hai, like I mean. So remember these keywords. Study GS4 syllabus just like you would study like the preamble or the fundamental rights or whatever. Study that properly, revise that properly, remember all those keywords and throw that in everywhere. Throw that in everywhere in the first part of the paper, because that's the precise demand of the question. The demand of ethics paper is to ensure that you know what are the qualities that are required in a civil servant, that you know that the evaluator will be able to assess you as a good civil servant. So make sure you know the demand of the question, remember the syllabus keywords, make sure you understand that properly. I mean, integrity is a word in English dictionary, but the ethics meaning of integrity is slightly different. So when it comes to ethical vocabulary, it might be slightly different from dictionary meaning. So make sure you know what those terms mean in ethical vocabulary, maybe make short notes on it, revise it, and in exam throw in these keywords in every answer. Other than that, GS4 preparation is mostly like GS1, 2 or 3. There are standard books. I have studied lexicon for ethics in my first attempt. And this year I actually read through D.K. Balaji's book. D.K. Balaji's ethics book is actually pretty good. I was not able to study it properly, but the thing is he provides a lot of good number of examples. And examples are another thing that are very useful in ethical paper and even in essay. The thing is, ethics, sometimes the questions can be very abstract. Like, what does honesty mean? But there your answer should not be completely philosophical. I mean, you should not bore the evaluator. Like, honesty, so and so and so. I mean, you can give a very abstract answer to that. But what works better is give an abstract definition, give some examples. I mean, take integrity, so and so. For example, so and so civil servant did so and so thing. So you are connecting that to the real world. So connecting that abstract concept to the real world actually helps a lot. First of all, it helps the evaluator to understand, okay, TK, he knows what this actually means in the real world. And the second thing is, you won't have to write a lot of abstract stuff. I mean, that's difficult to do, right? I mean, so ethics may, in short, one thing is, remember your syllabus well, use all those keywords. And second thing is, remember a lot of examples. Again, this can be examples from your real life. This can be examples of civil servants doing various things. I mean, last year a famous thing was Armstrong Palme, IAS. He actually built a road in Lake Manipur. Sorry, which state? Mizoram, I think. So the thing is, this thing featured in almost every ethics answer that year. And that's fine. Because you can use that in many ways. I mean, you can use that as an example of proper dedication to service. You can use that as an example of integrity. You can use that as an example of innovation in services. So when you find these good examples, note that down somewhere. As I said earlier, in GS42, create a folder. I mean, create a proper subfolder for each of these terms: integrity, selflessness, honesty. And when you find good examples, organize that under the subtopics and try to revise them occasionally. So that exam name, it naturally comes to you. Wherever possible, throw in these examples so that your answers look more grounded. I mean, it shows that you are not just a person who knows theoretical stuff. It shows that you are a person who can apply that in real life. So that's something you have to do. And when it comes to case studies, the thing is, theory won't help you much there. Because case studies we know the basic things to do. Case studies remember that basic template. Udhar, the theory will help. I mean, in a case study, the basic thing to do is first identify the ethical dilemma. You will be given a hypothetical situation. You will be given a role to play in that. Mostly it will be the DM of a state or like SP of a district, DM of a district or SP of a district or CM of a state or whatever. So you will be given a role. You will be given a hypothetical situation. And the question would most likely be, what would your course of action be? So the demand of the question essentially is, first you have to identify what is the ethical dilemma there. I mean, you can't proceed otherwise, right? You need to identify the ethical dilemma. And secondly, you need to identify every stakeholder. Because in every ethical dilemma, there will be multiple stakeholders. Like if a flood is happening in a district, the people who are affected by the flood are stakeholders. The CM of the state, the various firefighters and the army people who come there, like all of them are stakeholders in the issue. So whatever be the hypothetical situation, think about that a bit. Make sure you are identifying every stakeholder. There will be some obvious stakeholders, but there will also be non-obvious stakeholders. So make sure you are spending some time in identifying stakeholders. Because once you do that, rest of the question becomes very easy. Once you know kaun hai stakeholders, analyzing the options becomes very easy. Because in every option, the thing is, we cannot please everyone. That's the fundamental ethical dilemma. If the case is that of corruption, if we become corrupt, we are cheating ourselves. But if we do not do corruption, we are going to face the consequences because we will anger someone. So we cannot please everyone. That's a fundamental fact. But try to create a situation, try to evolve a solution which will provide maximum happiness to the maximum number of people while staying within the bounds of law. These are the two principles. One, the ethics paper is supposed to analyze how good a civil servant you will be. And the fundamental principle is you are supposed to execute the law. You are not supposed to make the law. You are not supposed to change the law. You are not supposed to make your own moral principles override the law. The law is there. You have to act within the confines of it. So make that your golden rule. Sometimes it's rather difficult to do that, but even then try to think outside the box. I mean, you can do stuff like, okay, worst case, you can say I will resign because I cannot proceed in this case. But even if you do, even if that's your course of action, even that's a legal thing. I mean, you can ultimately resort to even resigning or abdicating from the, transferring the charge to some other official. Even if you go to those extremes, never break the law. So that's the fundamental principle. And then make sure you are addressing all stakeholders. Usually the question will be, analyze the different possible courses of action. Action A will be this, action B is the other alternative. So when you are analyzing these actions, think about that in stakeholder terms. For example, in corruption, if suppose course A is, I will accept the corruption thing, I will overlook the corruption. I mean, suppose that's the option. In that case, you already have identified the stakeholders, right? Go back to them and analyze how that action is going to impact each of those stakeholders. So that will naturally give you pros and cons. So write that in pros and cons. And usually the final part is, what course of action will you finally use? Udhar, don't just limit yourself to writing, I will choose option C and move on. Don't do that. Justify that a bit. Even if you are short of space, spend some time in justifying that. Because this is another mistake that a lot of people use. Their train of thought is that they have already analyzed all the three options earlier. Pros and cons to likha hai. So their line of thinking is that, once all that analysis is done, you can just write that, okay, I'll choose option C and move on. But that's not how it works. Even if you are saying, I will choose option C, and even if all the pros and cons are written there already, still make sure that in the final paragraph or in your conclusion, you are again addressing the core ethical dilemma that was there in the first paragraph. Address that and point out precisely how you have managed to solve it. Because that's how the answer is wrapped up. First point, in the first introduction, you have identified this is the ethical dilemma. Conclusion may say, I will choose option B, and in choosing option B, I will be solving this ethical dilemma by so and so methods. Don't make it too long, but make sure you are doing that. So these are some of the pointers in ethics, and that brings us to the mains. That's essentially it. And finally, mains mein, the limiting constraint, as you all know, is time. You may know all of this. You may know what to do. You know what the answer format is. You know all the content is. But still, time will be the limiting constraint. Because as you already know, for a 10-mark question, you will only have 7 minutes to complete it. For a 20-mark question, you will only have like 10.5 minutes. Say 11 minutes for some questions. So writing a 10-mark question within 7 minutes or writing a 15-marker within 10.5 minutes, that's not easy. And sustaining that pace over 3 hours, sustaining that pace over 3 hours is quite difficult. This was my third attempt, right? So I had already written 2 mains, and still, when I wrote my first mains mock test this year, I was only able to complete 15 questions. I had to leave 5 questions. So that happens. So make sure from right now when you are practicing, also make sure that you are taking the time element in your head. Whenever you are writing answers, time your answers. Initially, don't force yourself to maintain the time, but still track your time. You should have an idea where you are standing. Every time you write a 15-minute answer, time yourself, okay, TK, I'm taking 13 minutes. I have to cut down 2 more minutes. So keep doing that. And eventually that will become a part of your conscious thinking. Every time you write an answer, that will become a part of your thinking, and eventually you will reach the ideal point, 10 and a half and 7 minutes. And after prelims, focus on speed. The first thing you have to do is ensure that you are finishing the paper. There is no alternative to that. Even if you are writing 18 extremely good answers, that's not better than writing 20 decent answers. 20 decent answers will get you more marks than 18 extremely good answers. Because extremely good is a subjective thing. The answer which looks extremely good to you might not look the same to the evaluator. You will see that. When you are writing mock tests, there will be some answers which make you feel happy. Okay, TK, I have done really well in that. And then when the marks come, you will be like, you are only getting 3 marks or 4 marks in that because you have missed some obvious demand of the question. That can happen. So do not bank on 18 or 17 really good answers. That doesn't happen in real life. What works is completing the paper and completing it decently. Addressing the proper demand of the question, writing the basic points, following the basic format, completing the paper. That's how it works. So after prelims, okay, TK, right now you are not in that stage. But once you reach the prelims, after clearing the prelims, your first consideration should be making sure that you are able to complete the paper. Content is secondary. Quality of writing is secondary. Even handwriting is secondary. Once you complete the paper, then you can focus on the secondary elements. But make sure you are completing the paper. That's the fundamental rule of answer writing, completing the paper. Okay. So that's it when it comes to mains. And let's move on to interview. Again, interview is not that close in the horizon for any of you, but let me give you some basic pointers. One thing is, the content that you develop now will be helpful for interview. So interview is not an independent stage. Interview is a culmination of the training journey, the preparation journey that you take. So from right now, if you are reading newspapers diligently, if you are making notes diligently, if you are writing GS notes, if you are revising your standard books, by the time the mains exam is over, your content will be more or less ready. And you will have adequate time to prepare for the presentation aspect. After mains exam, you will have at least 4 months to prepare for interviews. So the first thing that I would like to tell you is, do not waste time on all these interview videos or mock interviews or whatever. That's so far ahead in the horizon. Do not waste time on that right now. What you can do for interview right now is improving your content. The presentation thing can be improved later. Don't focus on that right now. Because interview is a very hyped up stage in the preparation process. For a lot of candidates, people waste a lot of time watching the Drishti mock interviews or the interviews of toppers, reading the transcripts. Just leave that all aside for now. It looks fun. You'll have a lot of fun preparing for it, but that comes later. So right now, don't worry about that too much. And at the same time, let me try to dispel some common misconceptions. One thing is, there is this misconception that vocabulary is very important, or the manner of speaking English, like having that Oxford accent. None of that matters. As long as what you speak is legible, understandable. I mean, if you speak a sentence and the second person can understand the meaning of the sentence, that's done, that's enough. Okay, so it's not about developing that accent. So you do not need to have any complex about like having a like rural accent, or like your vocabulary not being that good, or like your, I mean, all those things that, I mean, especially the candidates from rural backgrounds have, like, I mean, that doesn't matter. All that matters is communication. And once that communication is done, rest is about improving the content. So focus now on improving the content. Do not worry about the interview stage at all. Even if you have presentation problems, we have 4 months to improve that. Okay, and the thing is, another thing is, it's a very friendly process. I mean, the interview process is often hyped up to be a thing where, I mean, where tricky questions are asked, where the IQ or the aptitude of the candidate is like evaluated in very complex ways. That's not how it works. Like, you have a basic resume of yours called DAF, like detailed application form. You will be preparing that, you will be giving it to the panel, and the panel will essentially be going through that and asking related questions. And most of them will be questions for which the answers are very thorough to you. For example, in my interview, one of the questions was, why did you leave your job? I mean, that's something I'm very clear on. Like, I had thought a lot about that. So similarly, the questions will be about your background. Like, I mean, if you have done engineering, there can be some basic engineering questions. But that's not something very difficult. I mean, you can brush that up, I mean, some in the months before the interview, and you will be done. And if you have worked somewhere, there can be some questions about your work experience, which again, you should have some basic knowledge about. I mean, you have done that work for like 1 or 2 years, so you'll have basic some knowledge about it. So, and what matters most is confidence. And in many cases, candidates lose marks precisely because they are not confident. They are like, they have these complexes about, as I said earlier, somehow complex about their language, somehow complex about, like, I mean, they have done engineering, but they have this idea that they cannot face answers based on that. And somehow this very basic issue that the panel are like UPSC members and very esteemed IAS, IFS officers. So they get this stage fright, because when you see them as like high-powered authorities, you naturally get a fear of them. So what I would suggest is, do not think of them as like people who are powerful than you. Think of them as like elder family members. Like, talk to your UPSC panel like how you talk to your grandfather, or like friends of your grandfather. Like, you get that idea, right? You won't be talking to them like you are talking to your friends. You will have a basic amount of respect. At the same time, you won't be fearing them, because you know your grandfather, you know your grandfather's friends. Like, these are people like you have seen very commonly, and you can talk freely with them. So think of it that way, and that will actually help you in overcoming this stage fright of sorts. And the third thing is, be a bit diplomatic. I mean, you have to be honest. You shouldn't bluff in the interview. Like, no matter what happens, do not bluff in the interview. Like, these are people whose combined experience is like 5 times your age or whatever. Like, these are people who has like spent like 30, 40 years, multiple decades in government services or multiple decades in academics. So they will easily catch your bluff. And if people catch your bluff in an interview, okay, like, I mean, that interview is done. You can start preparing for next year. So whatever happens, so whatever happens, do not bluff in the interview. Like, if you do not know an answer, you can say, I don't know. That's fine. I mean, in my actual interview, I got 201 marks. There were at least 4 instances where I said, Ma'am, I'm sorry, I don't know that answer. And there was actually 2 instances where I said, Ma'am, I'm not completely sure about the answer. Can I take a guess? So once you do that, you come across as an honest person. On the other hand, if you take random guesses on every question, you will come across as a person who is like trying to cheat the board, who is trying to, like, present yourself as someone you are not. So don't do that. You are not expected to know every answer, because in the interview, technically they can ask anything under the sun. I mean, if you do not know something very basic, that can be bad. If they ask something like, take a college mail, like, I mean, you did this course, what was this course about? You cannot really say, I don't know. Like, I mean, so basic questions, why did you leave your job? You cannot be like, ma'am, take a, like, I will. So in those questions, you need to have definite answers. But in general questions, like when people ask you, like, what is Parvatmala scheme? It's okay to say, ma'am, I don't remember that right now. Take it. Like, I mean, not knowing what Parvatmala is doesn't make you a bad civil servant. I mean, not knowing what you worked on, I mean, in 2 years of your life will make you a bad civil servant. But not knowing what Parvatmala is or not knowing what the GDP of Ukraine is right now, that's okay. Say I don't know confidently to those questions. And sometimes there will be these questions which are rather opinionated, in which you can give extreme opinions. In those cases, try to take the middle ground. Again, as I said in ethics, try to make sure that you are staying within legal bounds. Make sure you do not give extreme answers. I mean, you people will naturally have some ideological inclinations, right? We will all have it. In college, we may have worked in a political party, we may have done so and so things. That's fine. I mean, that's actually better than being apolitical, in my opinion. But at the same time, the interview board is not the place or time where you showcase those ideologies. It's a place or time where you tell them that you will be a good civil servant, where you will be serving the government impartially, regardless of which government is in power. So tone down your ideologies, be diplomatic, be respectful, and within those bounds, be truthful and honest and frank, and you will get through the interview. It's a simple process. You have plenty of time to prepare for it after mains. I just wanted to give you a basic idea on that.